to read today. You have the rules together with a very short translation. This translation, as you will see, is partly based on the Vutti. There is no other way around, so we have to do it in this way. And then for each rule, you have one example that illustrates the main point of the rule. So I will be referring sometimes to this handout, but not too much, because the main point of the session, again, like in other classes, is not so much to read the grammar and try to understand the grammatical doctrine or the grammatical teaching, but to try to understand how this teaching is delivered, how it is given. And last day we were trying to understand how Anuvutti works. Today we will see a little bit more of that, together with how Anuvutti works when there is optionality involved. Optionality means that for certain rules, more than one option is acceptable. You have seen that in Pali many times. You have seen that, for instance, for the ablative singular, you can say Buddha or Buddhamha or Buddhasma, etc. So there are different pachayas, or in this case, different vibhaktis that you can attach to the base Buddha in order to form a correct word. So how does a grammarian provide for all these different possibilities? That's the question. And as you will see, one of the mechanisms of doing that is using option markers. That means markers that say, optionally, you can also introduce that affix. So if you remember in the first session, we saw an overview of the structure of the Kaccāyana grammar. This is more or less the map, or topic-wise, the map of the Kaccāyana. And what we're going to see today is only this much, the beginning. Not really the beginning. We are going to skip or go very fast through the definitions, because they are simply definitions, and some of the terms are very clear, and I think many of you are already familiar with them, such as Sara, which means vowel, Vyanjana means consonant or the syllable. What we are going to read really is part 2 of the Sandhi section. That's about vowel Sandhi. That means the ligature of vowels. When one vowel meets another vowel. That could be a kind of romantic story. So when a vowel meets a vowel. That would be the title of today's class. If we want to summarize the first part of the Sandhi, that's the beginning of the Kaccāyana, we skip rule 1, which is very kind of introductory, and straight away in Kaccāyana 2, we have a definition of the term akkara. And the definition goes like this: akkara is what follows. So a, I, u, e, o, kaga, etc. So these are the akkaras. When we say akkara, it can mean any of these sounds. Rule 3 defines sara, that means vowel, and these are the vowels in Pali: a, I, u, e, o. And within the vowels, you have rasa, short, a, I, u, diga, that means long, a, I, u, e, o. Then in Kaccāyana 6, you have the definition of Vyanjana, which is very simple. It means Vyanjana is the rest. Whatever is not vowel is a Vyanjana, as you can see in the list. Then a definition of Vagga, another concept that becomes useful in the grammar. That means literally a group. These are the groups of 5, following the sequence of sounds that have been given in Kaccāyana 2. And you're probably familiar with this kind of arrangement, because that it's still used today in modern Pali grammars or Sanskrit grammars. These are the Vargas or Vaggas. And then in Kaccāyana 8, there is the definition of Nigahita, that's nasalization, sometimes called Anuswara. And then Kaccāyana 9 is a paribhasa that we have seen before, that you can use the terminology of the Sanskrit grammars if it's necessary. And rules 10 and 11 are very important, very interesting. They are concerned with writing. They tell us how to unite and separate words when they coalesce because of Sandhi. But the meaning of these 2 rules is a little bit complex, so to say, and we are going to skip them because it's not strictly necessary. These are the definitions that are given in Sandhi 1, and having seen that, we can move directly to Sandhi 2. This is what you have in the handout. You'll see that my translations in the presentation are not exactly the ones that you have in the handout. The handout is a kind of guide so that you can see the whole chapter in one single page. So the chapter starts with a very simple rule that I think we have seen before, so it should not be very difficult. Sara, sare, lopam. If you remember, sara is a nominative plural, sare is a locative, and lopam is accusative. as you see in the Vutti, sara, ko, sare, pare, lopam, papponti. That means the vowels, sare, pare, that gives the right context in the locative. When a vowel follows, they obtain papponti, lopa, elision. That means they are elided. You can see the example, for instance, yassa indriyani becomes yassindriyan, that we have seen already. Now, what after Kaccāyana 12, we find Kaccāyana 13. Va, paro, asarupa. Note that this rule begins with va, which is an option marker. That means literally or. We can translate it simply as optionally. Many translators translate it as optionally. Paro, that means the following one, asarupa. And asarupa is an ablative, as you can see in the Vutti. Saramha asarupa, paro saro lopam papotiva. So if following what we said in lesson 2, we take the ablative as meaning after something, that means after a vowel, saramha, which is asarupa, which is dissimilar, that means it's not similar, it's dissimilar in shape, or not similar in shape. Paro saro, that's the nominative, that's the thing that will be replaced. Lopam papoti, it obtains lopa, it is elided, it obtains elision, it undergoes elision. Wow, optionally. So here, just to understand what the meaning of savarna or sarupa means, they are synonymous. So a and a are called avarna. So when we say avarna, doesn't simply mean a, it means a and a. It includes all the vowels that have the varna, the color or the shape of a, that it means short and long. Similar with e and e, similar with u and u. So u are savarna, and e are savarna, a are savarna. Savarna or sarupa means the same. They have the same varna or they have the same rupa. And asavarna or asarupa means dissimilar. So the rule that we have seen, asarupa means it has to be a vowel that is not similar. So in the case of e, any other vowel that is not long e would be asarupa. I think that is more or less clear. So here you can see that nothing recurs from the previous rule except lopam papoti. That is because this nominative paro has replaced sara, and that changes the structure. So asarupa also introduces a left context that we have not seen before. And the locative that we have seen in the first rule, sare, basically disappears. And that is optional.
Paro there.
Sorry?
The word paro there, that means the following.
The following, yeah. And we understand, it's the following vowel. So the word saro actually comes from sare in the first rule. In the first rule you have sara, sare, lopam, but this sare in the locative here changes to the nominative, because actually now we are talking about the second. If you have two vowels, one preceding one and the following one, in the first rule in Kaccāyana 12, we are saying that the first one disappears. The first one is elided. In this one, we say that the following one is elided. So that's why the case ending changes here. So here, paro stands for the same swara that in Kaccāyana 12 is expressed in the locative. That we understand from the meaning. It's not entirely clear from the structure, but we also need to look at the meaning and, of course, at the Vutti. So that, I think, it will become a little bit more clear as we advance in the reading, because the way the Anuvutti works in Kaccāyana 12, 13, and 14 is a little bit complicated. Well, after that, I think it's quite straightforward. The reason why it is complicated is again because of the economy of language. Try to use as less or lesser words as possible. And that will be the reason. So here, va, paro, sarupa is like there is elision of the preceding vowel, or optionally there is a elision of the following vowel, as long as it is following a vowel that is dissimilar. So that would be a requisite. Now in Kaccāyana 14, again we see a rule beginning with an option marker. That is kochi. Kochi asavannam lutte. That means sometimes asavarna, that means dissimilar, lutte. So that in itself is difficult to understand. If we read the sutta, you can see that there are already bits that are coming by Anuvutti from the previous rules. So what we have to understand is saro paro from rule 13, the preceding one. The following vowel, pubbasare lutte. So lutte means pubbasare lutte. That is the result of Kaccāyana 12. In Kaccāyana 12, the preceding vowel has been elided. So after this elision prescribed in Kaccāyana 12, kochi, that means in some places or sometimes, asavanam papoti. So it means, if you see the examples, after you have an elision of the preceding vowel, the vowel that remains sometimes becomes a savanna. So it changes into a vowel that is dissimilar to itself. In this case, you have from na upeti become nupeti, and from nupeti nopeti. So u has changed into o. O is a savanna in relation to u. That's what this rule is saying. Here, what I'm most concerned with, or what I would like to highlight, is that this kochi, this marker, blocks or cancels the previous option marker wa in Kaccāyana 13, and therefore it opens an option within an option. So in some ways, that I think the last line maybe I should maybe delete it, but I'm not so sure here. But kochi here is an option marker. It cancels the wa in vaparo asarupa. So you remember in the first lesson or the first session, we had this slide. This is what we see usually, and our understanding should be something like what you see on the right. So there are different levels. There's a hierarchy in the rules, and if we apply this to the three rules that we have seen, simply based on the use of option markers and the anubhuti, this is what we see, but this is what we have to understand. Otherwise, we can get a little bit confused. So here, va and kochi, they are both option markers, as we have said, and kochi in 14 blocks the option va. Therefore, it opens a new domain within the, or under the governance or under the domain of Kaccāyana 12. So Kaccāyana 12 is the general rule. Kaccāyana 13 is a kind of exception to that general rule. Kaccāyana 14 is an exception to that general rule. 2 is not an exception to the rule 13. Now, with regard to the meaning of the option markers in the Pali tradition, so specifically I mean the tradition of Kaccāyana, which is one of the two main traditions of grammar. There is, since the early commentaries, the Mukhamatadipani of Bimala Buddhi, that is 10th century Common Era, approximately. There is a saying, or there is a teaching that says that there are basically two different levels of option in the grammar, and we have four technical terms. Kochi and nava, they mean the same, and va and vivasa, they also mean the same. The stanza, this stanza is from it's a summary of this idea. It's found in the Mukamatasara, which was written probably around the 13th century in Pagan, in Myanmar, in Burma, by Gunasagara, and that's a work that I've been editing. This stanza, actually, you will find it quoted in different places, both in traditional grammars and also in modern books. But I don't think anyone has actually, they saw where it comes from, because sometimes the traditional grammars, they quote it without saying where it comes from. It actually comes from the Mukamatasara. And the meaning is this. So the Pali says, Kochi nava chayekatta yavuyena ikarupaka ba vivasa samanatta payeno vaya rupaka. The words kochi and nava, they have one and the same meaning. They have one meaning, one single meaning. They mean the same. They generally yield, or they produce, they derive one single form. Whereas the words va and vivasa, they have a common meaning, that is the same, they mean the same. They mostly yield two forms. The point here is that if we are generally, that's why it says yebuyena or payena, that means in most cases, not always, but in most cases, kochi and nava, they will try to tell you that in some cases only one form is possible. When you have an option, only one of the forms is possible in some cases. But the words va and vivasa, they express an open option, so both forms are possible. It can produce two different forms, and they are both correct. So if we check again the rules that we have seen, 12, 13, and 14, 13 is a kind of exception or opens a subdomain with respect to 12. 12 says that vowels before a vowel are elided, and 13 says, but optionally, a vowel following the similar vowel is elided. So Kaccāyana 13 is subordinated to Kaccāyana 12. Similarly, Kaccāyana 14 is also subordinated to Kaccāyana 12, not to the preceding one, not to Kaccāyana 13. And we have to read it in this way. Vowels before vowel are elided, but sometimes, Kwachi, after this elision, the remaining vowel changes to a dissimilar sound. So this is how we have to read. That's why understanding the different levels is important, because Kaccāyana 14 has to be read as following Kaccāyana 12. Now, having read that, I think the rest will be a little bit easier, and we will also revise how Anubhuti works. Here is from 14 to 15. We have seen 14 already, and now 15 looks pretty straightforward, and it's very short. Digam. So that's a sutta that you can all memorize, and at least you will know one sutta from Kaccāyana. As the sutta says, Digam. So that means simply long. But how would you unpack the meaning of this sutta? We have seen that whatever in the previous session, according to the principles of Anubhuti, whatever is not cancelled is recurs, comes again. And what is cancelled is something that was performing the same function. So here, digam is an accusative, and as you will see, it actually performs the same function as asavannam in rule 14. So the only thing you have to do is change the vutti from 14 to 15, changing asavanna with digam. That's what you have. In 14, you have saroko, paro, pubbasare, lutte, kochi, asavannam, papoti. So this asavannam, you change it for digam, and you have the full meaning of the rule. In this way, you save a lot of energy. You don't need to say saroko, paro, pubbasare, you just say digam. Kochi, asavannam, lutte, digam. It means also, sometimes instead of becoming asavanna, it becomes long, digam. I think you can see the example in the handout. In the case of na upeti, instead of becoming no upeti, it becomes nu upeti with a long u. You will find this in the very famous formula in Pali, yena bhagava tenu pasankami. So if you would look at the manuscript, sometimes it's tenu pasankami with short u, sometimes it's with long u. Both are possible, actually. So in this case, sometimes it happens. So here you can see that the adesa, the replacement in Kaccāyana 14, is expressed with an accusative singular, and in Kaccāyana 15, this accusative singular is blocking or cancelling the previous one, so the previous one does not recur, is replaced with digam. But the rest is the same, the rest recurs. This is how Anubhuti works. This is a very basic example of Anubhuti that anyone can understand, and it reminds us of the case one that we saw last day, but we are going to repeat quickly here how Anubhuti or recurrence works. Suppose we have a rule with 3 elements. Here, every color represents a function. So each element performs a different function in the rule. Now, suppose we have another rule coming after, and we have an element performing the function yellow, but it's different than the first one. First we have Y, now we have O. The question would be, what is recurring here? What do we have to understand when we say O after X, Y, Z? As you all guessed, probably, we have to understand X, O, Z. That's very simple. And if we would have then another rule that would say P, and this P is performing the function of the pink, then you understand that whatever is not cancelled recurs. So the only thing that is cancelled here is the pink, the previous pink element, that is Z. Therefore, X and O recur. That we have seen last day, I think is very clear. But let's look now into the optionality of some other rules that we have seen at the beginning of the class. We go back now and try to understand how Anubhuti works at the beginning of this chapter. We have seen these 2 different levels, but how do we understand that from Anubhuti? How does Anubhuti work here? So this would be case 2. We have, this is not exactly matching the Kaccāyana 12, 13, and 14, but in the theory is the same. The theory that is operating is the same. We have a first rule with 3 elements with 3 different functions. Then we have another rule with only 1 element plus a modulator, or in this case, an option marker. And we call it option marker A. So here, the question would be, what is recurring? So whatever is not cancelled recurs. Again, X and Z recur. So we read X, O, Z optionally. That would be. And then the problems begin here when we would have a third rule, which would say only P, that clearly is blocking the ping element in 2, so P is replacing Z, but we have an option marker B. What happens here? That the option marker B is cancelling option marker A, and that has important consequences in the reading of Anubhuti in line 3. So you can maybe think for 2 seconds, what would you read here by Anubhuti? You have probably you will say that X recurs. There is no doubt about that. The main question would be if you have to read again O or you have to read Y. And the answer is you have to read Y. And the why you have to read Y is the following. It's because option marker A is giving you an option between Y and O. So what the second line is saying is, in the case you have X, Y, Z, this Y alternatively could be O. That's what it's saying. But then you have another rule, and it says, again, optionally P. But this optionally is expressed with a different option marker. By doing that, what you are doing is to subordinate this line 3 to the first one. And then what you are saying is basically, in the case that you have X, Y, Z, this Z optionally could be P. So in this way, you can modulate the hierarchies and the different domains of rules. I hope that is more or less clear. So there are options, but an optional alternative always have to be between 2 elements. And you can see here that if you would understand that applies to Kaccāyana 13 and 14, they are giving you options between two different elements. And so that's what we would have. I'm sorry, I think the concert in the other apartment is starting. We'll get closer to the microphone. Now, just for the sake of understanding how this method works, we will see a case that we have not seen yet, but it can happen sometimes. Actually, it does happen sometimes in the Kaccāyana. We call it case 3. We start again with 3 elements. Then we have an option marker A. Then suppose we have another rule, and there is no option marker. There is nothing. So in this case, what would you read by Anubhuti? The option marker is not cancelled, but we are introducing P. So what would you read here? Unlike the previous example, unlike case 2, here everything recurs. And if you would not have any other option marker cancelling option marker A, everything recurs. So you read X, O, P, and again option marker A. That's how usually in most cases Anubhuti works. Everything recurs, that is not cancelled, or that is not blocked. Now we have seen how Digam has to, we go back to 15, we continue our reading. 15 was clear, everything goes by Anubhuti except Asavan Nam. And now we have Pubocha. So from the Bhuti of Kaccāyana 15, you can see that this nominative Pubo is actually replacing the Paro. So the opposition is here, it's between whether the rule applies to the previous vowel or to the following vowel. And in Kaccāyana 15, this digam applies to the remaining following vowel. Now in Kaccāyana 16, what is actually telling you is that also this digam, this lengthening, can happen to the previous remaining vowel when the following has been elided. So in the note, you can see that this word paro is recurring from Kaccāyana 13, and here it is finally cancelled by pubo, which performs the same function. And the word cha indicates that the rest recurs. So kwachi digam papoti, this is all going down, it recurs. But the rest is changed because of the pubo. So pubo indicates that we are already going to the earlier vowel if we have 2 different vowels. So to make it a little bit clearer, you have that saro and Papoti, this comes from Kaccāyana 12 by Anubhuti. Saralope Kate Kwachi, that comes from Kaccāyana 14, and Digam comes from Kaccāyana 15. So all this information is being dragged down, is being carried by Anubhuti. We continue the reading, and then after Pu Bocha, that means the preceding vowel can also become long sometimes. We have another sutta that says Yam Edantassa Adeso. That is an interesting sutta in the style of the grammarians. Probably if you just read Yam Edantassa Adeso, apart from Adesa, that means replacement, the rest is difficult to guess. What is Yam? What is Edantassa? I never seen a word like Edantassa. But as you see in the Vutti, if you read the Vutti, it becomes clear. Sorry, Edantassa means Ekarasa Antavuttassa. That means the sound E, Kara means the form or the sound of the sound E when it is at the end of a word. So this instead of the sound, it's in the genitive, instead of the sound E at the end of a word, you have the replacement adesso Yam. So Yakara adesso hoti, the replacement Ya is there. You can see in the examples, Adigato ko miyayam. Miyayam actually means me ayam. So the E of me becomes Ya. And you understand actually that you could understand that it becomes Ya, and then that's why Ya plus A makes a long A. But this A usually is understood as a lengthening. So me ayam becomes mi ayam, and mi ayam becomes mi ayam. It's not so important here. What I would like to actually highlight is again the anubhuti, how some words are recurring and some words are not recurring. You see that many words are not recurring. The main reason for that is that there is a sign or there is an indication in the formulation of this rule that tells you that the core structure of the sutta has changed, and that blocks the structure of the previous suttas. In this case, you don't have a formulation nominative accusative to say that something obtains something, but you have a formulation genitive and nominative. That means instead of something, you have X replacement. So that changes the structure. That means